Purity ritual, menstruation, istihadha, and nifas. Menstruation. It is the flow of blood that comes with its known descriptions to women of its black color and distinct smell. It is also usually accompanied by pain and cramps. Nifaas. It is the bleeding that comes after childbirth, and its maximum period is 40 days. How to purify. 1. Washing the place of blood with water. 2. Following the location of the blood with musk. 3. Ghusl, soaking the head and body with water. 4. Performing ablution. Istihadha. It is bleeding that is not menstrual or postpartum, and it may continue for long periods. How to purify? 1. Cleaning the site of the occurrence, removing the blood. 2. Performing ablution for each prayer. Notes. 1. If postpartum bleeding exceeds 40 days, it is considered istihadha bleeding. 2. A pregnant woman does not menstruate. If a pregnant woman sees blood, it is considered istihadha. Menstruation and nifas forbidden actions. 1. Prayer. Cannot make it up. 2. Fasting. Must make it up. 3. Intercourse. 4. Tawaf around the holy house. Istihadha forbidden actions. Nothing is forbidden as it is during cases of menstruation and nifas. Conditions of al-istihadha. 1. That it is to be a known cycle for women. For example, a woman's menstruation is known to last for a total of 6 days every month. And through this, she would be able to calculate what portion of her period is menstruation and what portion is istihadha. 2. She does not have a known cycle, but can distinguish between menstrual blood and istihadha. 3. She does not have a known cycle and cannot distinguish. So in this case, she considers her cycle as most women's cycles are. The menstruation is considered to last 6 or 7 days of each month, starting from the first period in which blood is seen. And the blood that lasts for the rest of the month is considered istihadha. 4. That she has both a known cycle and is able to distinguish. In this condition, the woman should rely on her known cycle and not on distinction. If she forgets when her known cycle is set to come, then she can distinguish whether it's menstruation or istihadha. Okay, so this lesson is specifically about what happens to women. And it is part of the purification ritual because purifying oneself from it happens in a specific manner in order for a woman to be in a state of purity. So the first thing is menstruation, which everyone, I believe, knows. Every woman goes through it. Then we have the nifas, which in English is postpartum bleeding. It is similar to menstruation, but it happens after childbirth. It can last up to a maximum of 40 days, but some women can experience less than that. And purification from both menstruation and nifas are performed in the same way as they're listed here in the lesson. As for istihadha, it's bleeding, but it's not considered menstruation or nifas. And it can stay for long periods of time. And the bleeding for it can come in different forms like discharge or heavy bleeding or anything of the like. But the most important thing to know about istihadha that it is not menstruation or nifas. So it has its own form of purification. It's not performed through ghusl. Istihadha does break the wudu though, so ablution must be performed before each prayer as long as istihadha is present. And of course, as you see in the lesson, we have to first clean the area of the blood and then we perform the ablution. Now, in regards to nifas and menstruation, as we read in the lesson, if there's any bleeding that is constant and exceeds the 40 days of postpartum, which is nifas, or exceeds the days of menstruation bleeding, or menstrual bleeding, the bleeding cycle, it is considered istihadha. We also know how to distinguish whether the blood blood during a woman's cycle is considered menstrual blood or istihadha blood, which is explained more on the next page. Before we flip to it, it also says here, the last point, if the pregnant woman were to notice any blood, then she would continue to pray normally. Why? Because the pregnant woman does not go through a menstrual cycle. Okay, moving on to the next page. We have here the forbidden actions listed for menstruation and Nifaas, meaning during either menstruation or Nifaas, these specific actions are forbidden for every Muslim woman to perform. They are 1, prayer, cannot make it up. 2, fasting, must make it up. 3, intercourse. 4, tawaf around the house. Again, these are forbidden for a Muslim woman to perform while during menstruation and Nifaas. I also wanted to clarify that the first 2 actions listed as forbidden here are prayer and the fasting. So just as we know in Ramadan, when the time for menstruation comes, or if a woman experiences postpartum bleeding during Ramadan, the woman must make up the fasting days that she missed. But for the prayers she missed, no, in the time of menstruation and Nifaas, she cannot make it up. It's forbidden to make it up. One moment. Okay. So yes, it's forbidden. These actions are forbidden during menstruation and Nifaas. It is forbidden to fast and pray. During Ramadan, again, if a woman, she has to eat. If a woman is during menstruation and Nifaas, she would have to eat. If a woman refrains from eating, then she would be considered doing something wrong. And of course, the following 2 forbidden actions listed here are intercourse and tawaf around the holy house. As for istihadha, there's nothing forbidden for a woman to do. However, there are conditions that every woman must understand regarding al-istihadha. In regards to it, after a Nifaas, if there's istihadha after Nifaas, postpartum bleeding again, it's pretty clear during postpartum, the bleeding, if it exceeds 40 days, then the blood that's remaining is considered istihadha. Now moving on to menstruation. How do we know if the blood present is menstruation or istihadha? We have 4 conditions that will help us determine. Number 1, the first one is that a woman has a known cycle. Now, what does a known cycle mean? It means that every month, the duration of her menstruation is known for her, whether she has it for 4 days, 6 or 7 days. Every month, it's the same for her. So it's a known cycle. It's her own known cycle. In this case, she would calculate those days of her known cycle as menstruation. After her known cycle is complete, if she still has blood, then that blood would be istihadha. An example of this could be if a woman has a known cycle that lasts for a total of 6 days. And come the 7th day, she sees any colored discharge or even heavy blood for the days after for the remainder of the month, that would be considered istihadha. Okay, the second condition is if a woman doesn't know if she has a known cycle, it's not familiar to her, but she can, on the other side, she can distinguish whether the blood is menstrual blood or istihadha. Like we just read in the lesson, menstrual blood can have a distinct odor and color as opposed to istihadha, which looks and smells different. So in this case, a woman is able to distinguish between the 2 and can calculate how many days her menstruation lasts, and that the remainder of the days would be considered istihadha. The third condition is where a woman does know if she has a known cycle and cannot distinguish whether it's menstruation or istihadha. Sorry, I believe the third condition is where she doesn't know if she has a known cycle and cannot distinguish both. In this case, she would take the average of most women's cycle, which is usually around 6 or 7 days. So for example, she would consider her cycle to last for a total of 7 days, even if she's not sure if her cycle lasts for a duration of 7 days. If she sees any blood for 7 days, then she would consider it menstrual blood. If the blood continues past the 7th day, then she would consider it istihadha. The fourth condition, the fourth and last one, is that if a woman is both able to distinguish and has a known cycle. In this case, she does not distinguish. She calculates using her own known cycle. For example, if her cycle lasts for 7 days, and on that 7th day, she notices a distinct discharge or heavy blood, it may not look like menstrual blood for her, because again, we said that she's able to distinguish. It wouldn't matter though, but because in her case, she would calculate based on her known cycle. So after the 7th day, she would make ghusl and would have completed her menstrual cycle. So to conclude, these conditions, there are 4. Again, 1 is if a woman has a known cycle. 2 is if a woman does not have a known cycle but can distinguish. 3 is if a woman neither has a known cycle nor can she distinguish. And 4 is if a woman has both a known cycle and can distinguish. And that concludes today's lesson on menstruation, istihadha, and nifaas. Jazakallah khairan.